you, Cameron. Thanks, everyone. It's really great to be here. So I want to tell you a little bit about this new Department of Technology and Innovation we have in the city. But first, I just wanted to say I've been to Chi-Half-Net a couple times in the past. I see a lot of faces I've never seen before here, and that's really cool. There's always an electric energy when you walk into this space, and so many people who are here for so many different reasons, but all kind of united around this idea of where we live and how we can make it better. And we all have our skills and our backgrounds and what we bring to the table, and it's just a really unique space. I feel honored and privileged to be a part of it, and thanks for having us here today. Welcome us. So, my name is Nick Lucius. I'm CIO, Commissioner of the Department of Innovation. Department of Technology and Innovation. That was not planned. That was literally not planned. And so that's what we're called today. And a little bit about myself. I recently, before I took this role on, I worked in the mayor's office during the time of COVID. Worked as chief data officer, oversaw the city's data policies, data strategy, and was thrilled and honored when Mayor Johnson came into office and asked me to take an idea for what could be a new department and create it. And so in the fall of 2023, got the opportunity to speak with City Council and bring a proposal to create a new department for technology and innovation. And today, I'm here to tell you about that department. It's not just a copy of what the prior Department of Innovation and Technology was. And so we've prepared a lot of slides, a lot of information to walk you all through what we've done. But I want to make sure that we have time for questions, because this is actually the first time in a public setting that we've talked a lot about how this department works. And really attribute that to your all's interest in this, to be able to get this opportunity to put this all together in this way. But since this is new, I can't wait to hear what kinds of questions and feedback and thoughts and ideas you all have. So with that, I'll just jump right in. So Melissa, who is our head of planning, is going to walk through some slides after I speak for a little bit, and then we'll go to Q&A. All right, so a really condensed history. A lot happened between 2010 and 2025. Here are some of those things. In 2010, the city's data portal launched. And for those of you familiar, this is a place where you can get tons of updated data on city operations, everything from crimes that occur in the city, every Uber and Lyft trip in the city that happens is on that portal. Tons of different types of data sets. 8 years later, the city launched a new 311 app and website. And so that was a big milestone in the city's technology history. In 2019, the former Department of Innovation and Technology merged to create kind of this general services type department, not unlike what the GSA is for the federal government. And another big key milestone is the launch of the design system. I'll talk a little more later about what that is. And of course, last year we get the new Department of Technology and Innovation. And what have we been up to for the last 19 months? I call it a comprehensive reimagination of IT in the city of Chicago. We'll tell you a little bit about that. All right, so when we got started, we found that we had some core digital assets, some if you will, iconic platforms that make up what we do for residents. We run Chicago.gov, our entire web presence. 311.chicago.gov, a digital lifeline, where if you need something from your city and it's not a 911 call, that's the hub. And it should be where we have a lot of our city services provided. We've got the data portal I mentioned earlier, where you can find truth and transparency, and the design system, toolkit for consistent equitable design. These four properties, or these four assets, are really what we found to be some of the most used, most visible pieces of what we in Chicago provide as technology services. we're adding to that, and we've done that with our digital playbook. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, but I'm going to leave a lot of the details for when Melissa comes up here in a moment to talk about it. The digital playbook is something that we've published that it was born out of an understanding that digital services are created by 30-something different city departments. Yeah, we're a decentralized technology team. We've got 80 people, and we're going to grow to 140. But even then, this city's got 30,000 employees, and stuff is going to become a digital service, whether we work on it or not. So we built a guide for anyone in the city who's publishing to our website, creating web apps, creating mobile apps, creating services for departments, to help them understand some principles that they can apply to create better digital services. And so we have, I'll just highlight people first. Digital by default, you still see in government these days, I'm sure it's not a surprise to anyone, that digital by default is not always the prevailing mindset. Integrated and collaborative and really focused on building expertise. Because again, we found that we in our department are not going to do everything for everybody. So if we want better digital services, we've got to help people create things. That is our digital playbook. Again, you'll learn more about that in a little bit. I wanted to tell you nuts and bolts about our department, because it's totally different than it was before. We've got these 5 divisions or groups, if you will. We have planning to plan projects, delivery to build out development projects, support for after things are done, to maintain and support them, and cybersecurity to keep things safe and secure. Also have the Office of CIO. That's a lot of admin. It can be boring. I kind of find it interesting. I'll talk a little bit about that later. But that's it. It's a lot. It's simple. This is a much more simplified governance design to technology at the city than we had before. And while you could look at that and say, okay, so we got different people planning, different people building, different people supporting, maintaining. It doesn't work like that because we have a lot of folks in the departments that are continually connecting between project ideas, project delivery, and project maintenance support to ensure that we have a continuous improvement and a platform and product strategy to how we build digital services. And that's key, and that's something that over the last 19 months we have learned so much about really how difficult that is, and at an organization as big as the city. But it's that organization, those kind of key pillars that keep us aligned. So we're going to talk about each one of those groups. The planning division. This is when a department, an agency, a city commissioner comes and says, "Hey, I need help. I have an issue. I have a problem, or I have a new." Over the last few years, with a lot of the federal grants from the prior administration, we had a lot of new city programs that didn't exist before. We had a cash assistance pilot. We had migrant services that didn't exist before. And so we had a lot of departments that say, I need help, I need a new app, I need a new process, I need a new workflow. And so this is a new, not previously existing part of the department that works as a consultancy to help people take ideas, turn them into contracts, turn them into financial plans, business models, and then ultimately turn them into IT development projects. Then we also have, of course, a delivery section. This is the biggest part of our department by far. It's also the least staffed. We're growing, and we have not fully. We've made about 80 placements of people into positions, and we still have 60 more to go. Most of them are in delivery. When we're done filling out this section, we're going to have a team of software engineers, data analysts. We're going to have quality assurance folks, user experience, and then we also have some really cool positions that kind of tie all the different pieces together. That's things like business relationship manager. These are people who are going to really know a city department's portfolio who do they serve, what residents do they serve, what are the things that those residents need, and help design the platforms and products that we build based on their knowledge of that department. And we also have service managers who do kind of similar things, but for really big technology platforms like our platform for managing our finances, our platform for managing our human resources. If anybody ever watches city council hearings, one thing you'll hear often is just how difficult it can be to hire at the city, how difficult it can be to maintain procurement and financial functions. This may just sound like back office, boring stuff, but it can be some of the most critical elements of what we need to do better in order to deliver human services for people in order to get that furnace fixed so that you can keep that home, not go into homelessness, or find a shelter when you walk into the community service center at family support services that day that you find yourself in need of help. It's a lot of these back office functions, the ability to hire and pay contractors that are so vital to making those services work. That's why they're just so important. Okay. Support. This is critical. I like glorifying, or I should say, uplifting the work of what we do in maintenance and support. That keeps stuff alive. When we started as a department, we realized that we had to keep on the lights for all these city agencies. We manage billions of dollars of drinking water that goes out to 125 cities across our region that come from Lake Michigan, 2 international airports, miles and miles of roads, bridges. We manage all this stuff, and we had to just keep the lights on. And we had to figure out how to do that while hiring a team, while building legal, while building finance and HR, and building a department. So the support folks are critical because they're the reason why the garbage trucks keep coming every day. They're the reason why potholes get fixed. They're the reason why when you call 311, it works. That phone call goes through, that mobile app request goes through. Information security. This is, it's just amazing how this area always grows more than I expected to grow. For years, information security has been such an important growing field, and we doubled our staff before the Democratic National Convention as one of the first moves we made when we created ourselves as a department. We knew there were going to be a global attention of cyber attackers on the city of Chicago with a marquee event that the entire world was watching, where we had to make sure that we had no incidents, no outages, that we had consistent service. And it's just an ever-growing area. It was one of our fastest growing teams. And we have to keep the city safe. We have to keep people's information and data safe. Back to the office of CIO. This is it's an office that I run inside our group, and everything I said earlier about HR, finance, even contracts to some extent, although a lot of that is in enlistment planning. This just keeps the department going, and I will really want to stress this. We didn't exist as a department when we started, and so we learned firsthand how it's hard to describe this, that just the administrative tasks of keeping a city department alive and creating a new one from scratch are immense. And so it's almost like if anyone out here is a business owner, has created a business or been part of a small business, just imagine going from no employees to 80 employees while maintaining all of that infrastructure that I just referenced. And trying to figure out payroll, legal, finance, HR, contracting, with having 50 firms and paying out over $100 million every year in IT services. We had to figure out how to do all that without ever having done it before. And we built a really awesome team of accountants and contracts folks and administrative folks, HR folks who just they help our department to grow and to be an awesome place to work. Now I want to talk a little bit about, okay, so what did you get out of all that, right? Like we don't, at DTIs, which is what we call ourselves, we only work on things where we know it's going to be the reward for it. If we're going to work on something, how are we making something better for Chicagoan? How are we making things run better? Because we don't build technology just because it's cool tech. And so we worked really hard to identify cost savings. Why? Because the city has a pretty significant budget problem. We have more expenditures than revenues. That means that we either have to look to increase taxes to bring more money and one of the main tax mechanisms that the city has is property taxes. Property taxes are they tax people based on the fact that they have a home, whether they can afford it or not. So we at DTI want to try to find as much savings as we possibly can to ensure that this is $6 million that we've identified every year that doesn't have to become a property tax increase. This is $6 million every single year that we've saved that doesn't have to be taken away from a social service or some kind of benefits for people who are vulnerable. And so we've started out really focusing on how can we save money and how can we find more efficiencies. And like I said earlier, we also focus right away on cybersecurity, growing threat of global warfare and cyber and global attention on the city of Chicago. And then we also have had some key wins in modernization because these things are all connected. You can't win on cybersecurity unless you modernize all of the old unsupported platforms. You can't win in efficiency unless you get out of some of these old systems that cost a lot of money in order to keep them alive. So we helped our law department move off of a 20-year-old system that was ending life and move into a modern cloud-based, Salesforce-based case management system so they can just easily do their work. And we're helping the Department of Buildings while they continue an ongoing modernization project where it's just all about helping people go online and get the building permit easier and dispatching their inspectors out and dealing with all the workflow that they have and getting them into a modern system. Again, they're on a more than 20-year-old system that they're mostly migrated out of. We were helping them with the last couple of phases. Again, it saves money. It makes the city work better. What else have we done? So we have supported a really amazing place down Greater Grand Crossing called Exchange Chicago. I've gotten to visit there a couple of times, and it's a place much like the group, this building that we're in right now with IC Stars. It's a place where people can come in and have an opportunity to invest in themselves and see a career in technology. And I've met a lot of people down there who went from minimum wage jobs and within a matter of a few months got a job as a help desk technician, making 3 times the money they were making before, got a job in senior cybersecurity roles. And these are opportunities for Chicagoans to have a pathway from poverty to the middle class, to solid middle class. And it's all able to be done with our partners, our funding that goes through one of our technology contracts, and a couple of, I'm going to send the slide where I have a lot more information to exchange, and some of these entities. T33, Comer Education Campus, Greater Grand Crossing, and our partner SDI, who is a major vendor with us, all combined together in order to make this great opportunity available. And so that's something we're really excited not only to support, but to expand. Anything like an exchange, anything like IC Stars in the city of Chicago that helps out our residents. We're looking for how we can improve, how we can be a player to use the city of Chicago in our contracts, our funding, and our opportunities to invest more in Chicagoans, give them access to those jobs and those roles to lift up their careers. All right, what do we do next? We're going to continue our focus on people-first digital services. The mayor's got an ambitious program called Cut the Tape, which is aimed at creating more affordable housing by reducing the red tape involved in the building process. and that involves lots of departments who touch the development process, and we're helping them, again, reduce their inefficiencies and make the whole process just more simple. We have goals to improve our resident digital services. So think of this as 311 gives you an opportunity to go and put a service request in for potholes or signs down, or I put one in for a wire that was down one day and came and got fixed the next day. And anytime you see a city department on their website, they say, hey, apply for this program, or come get this service, come get this benefit, and they're doing it on the website, there's an opportunity for us to move that into our consolidated 311 app and web experience, just to make it so that you can get all your city stuff in one place. And not only do we have to do that, we have to make it easier to use. We've got to make it reduce as much of the friction on creating an account, putting in a request, following it online. That's got to be as easy as it possibly can, because the harder it is, the more difficult we make it for people to get these life-changing services. We have plans to make our website more accessible. Again, all aimed at easier to use, reducing inaccessibility, reducing friction. We are going to continue to strengthen cybersecurity. We've got big plans for an ERP system, and for the uninitiated, that stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. That is your back office, HR, finance, contracting, budgeting. That's the software you use for all that. And that is at an entity like the City of Chicago, that's massive. And the one that we're on, again, it seems like everything's 20-something years old. It's 20-something years old. We've got to modernize that. We've got to do it not just because we want it to be new, but in ways that help us to reduce costs and help us to be faster, so that we can get more services out to people, and then we can do it for less cost to the residents. And we got 60 more jobs. We got more hiring to do. We have a lot more we can do in IT governance, which I'll let Melissa talk about more, but what this is just making sure that the whole city is involved in our approach to technology. Technology is intertwined with everything a city department does today. And so we have to ensure that we're all at the table when we're making these decisions. And that is the end of my part. So I'll let Melissa come up and tell you about the planning division.
All right. Well, thank you, Nick. And yeah, I will probably echo some of the things that Nick shared already, do a little bit deeper dive into planning. So, like Nick introduced earlier, planning is one of our 5 divisions in DTI. It's a new area. So, while we've always run certain capabilities at the city, enterprise architecture, contracts, those aren't necessarily new things. City's always been doing them. IT's always been doing them. But having it established as a formalized division within the department really puts emphasis and focus on the importance of these components of IT. So we're not just looking at technology for the sake of technology, but we're being strategic, we're being streamlined, we're setting standards, and we're being a driving force for the city of Chicago from a strategic perspective. So part of the reimagining of how the city does IT that Nick referenced was setting up a division to focus on these things. So among the areas that fall under planning, we have enterprise architecture. So this is really about promoting alignment to our standards, making sure that technology is streamlined at the enterprise level, but also within departments. Strategic planning and governance. So establishing citywide IT governance structures. Nick touched on this at the end of his statement, but looking at how do we bring everybody in the city into the fold of how we make decisions. We're a small department, but we're running a huge organization. So we don't need to be the only ones at the IT decision table. We want to bring everybody in, all the other city departments, to make sure there's representation. Vendor and license management. Of course, we've always had a lot of wonderful IT partners that we work with at vendors, but we've never really focused on building those relationships and partnerships and being strategic about license optimization, tech purchasing. Contracts and procurement, talked about that a little bit. We have a lot. We have dozens and dozens of IT contracts that DTI manages. They're not only for the services that DTI provides, but we can give access to those to our other city departments as well. And then e-discovery, this is a little bit different, a little bit of one-off, but this is the area in planning really focused on transparency, public records availability, and there's a lot of interaction through the departments this team focuses. So one of the first things that planning division tackled as part of our modernization, part of standing up a new department, was developing a citywide IT strategy. So this is what guides our work. This is what guides the direction that we move in, the why we do certain things, why do we make certain decisions. And it was developed in partnership with representatives from all corners of the city department. So again, not just developed from a silo of DTI as the central IT agency, but with us as the administrators bringing all of these other corners of the city together. So outlines our vision, outlines our values as represented in our guiding principles. This is what we're always aiming at when we are figuring out how to deliver services and why we deliver those services. So this has really been a foundational piece of how we make sure we're on track. Are we on course with what we set out to do as the departments? Kind of drilling down into the strategy a little bit further, these list out our strategic goals. So we have, of course, nice sounding, lofty strategic goals, making things people first, having a data-driven approach. But the way that we actually operationalize this, like how do we make this come true? And the way that we do that is in a lot of different facets, but every new idea, new request, new need that comes into DTI, so if a department comes to us and says, hey, we need to be able to do this faster, or we need to be able to deliver this service out to residents, it's not always necessarily something that we just dive right into from a technology standpoint. One of the first things we do is we say, okay, let's bump it up against our strategy. Let's bump it up against our strategic goals. Where does it fit in? Are we on track? And that's kind of like our first look at an idea to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. We use this framework very heavily, not only in looking at ideas or business needs that come into us from other departments, but also as we plan ahead too. So as we look ahead to 2026 and beyond for our budget planning purposes, every funding request for IT initiatives, every dollar that any city department would want to consider spending on an IT initiative, kind of the first pass at vetting those requests is going to be bumping up against our strategy. So we always want to make sure that right from the get, we're making sure we have this alignment. This, of course, will become more nuanced and refined as you continue down that path. But strategic goal alignment is one of the main things that we consider when we look at any work that DTI is doing. So to really make sure that we can realize our strategy, right? Because the strategy being vision and goals and principles, that's nice to put together and to say, but how do we actually take action on this and make it part of our reality? So one of the other first things the planning division led as part of a stand-up of our department was developing a central IT governance framework. And what this means is we want to establish a framework where DTI, once again, as the central IT agency, isn't making decisions or driving strategy or driving the IT for the city in a silo. This is an opportunity to bring in representation from other city departments, from mayor's office, from alders, and really make sure that we have a place where there's a strategic decision-making body, so our technology strategy group being our primary body, and making sure that we have kind of a collective working on priority setting, on IT investment evaluation, looking at our standards, so our architecture board, kind of the functions of those areas being more in the enterprise architecture world. What are our technical standards? How are we making sure that projects or initiatives that we move forward are aligned? And then investment, looking at where are we going to be spending dollars. We have a lot of projects, there's a lot of competing priorities. So how do we make a decision from a strategic perspective where we're going to move with some of those investments. And again, we bring in participation and representation from the other city departments because we can deliver on the tech, but when we're making decisions that are going to drive the strategy forward for services that are being delivered to residents, that's not just a technical decision. That's something that we need to bring in, and we want to bring in that partnership. So this has been, I think, a really important part of the philosophy of how we think about delivering technology within the city. So what this group actually does is convenes once a month approximately. We bring forward topics, or they bring forward topics that we want to evaluate. So this can be anything from looking at some of the big initiatives like ERP that Nick mentioned, making sure that since that's such a big initiative, how does that roll up into these bodies to make sure that there's some oversight? How do we make sure that we are developing roadmaps for upcoming technologies and uses of technologies? So thinking about AI, how are we thinking about that as a city and how we're going to use it in our day-to-day, but also how are we going to provide guidance to residents? Thinking about procurement, purchasing processes. How can we continue to innovate and make those smoother and easier in the city? So these are just some of the things that this group, the TSG, works on as a body. Kind of shifting gears over to another area, Nick mentioned our digital playbook. So another big outcome of this kind of recent few years of modernization, again, kind of moving our central IT position from simply just being like an asset-focused technology. We have computers and we have tech and we deliver that out. But how do we become, as central IT, focused on service delivery? What is the service that we as an IT agency deliver to residents, deliver to other departments? And one of the ways that we do that is through our digital playbook. So this toolkit is really how we embed this philosophy of continuous improvement and kind of proactive development into how we do work. So again, I think it's important to kind of, we have all of these nice plays and we have these principles specific to the digital playbook. They roll up to our larger IT strategy. But what does this actually mean in our day-to-day? How do we as a central IT agency deliver on this? And the way that we do that is, I'll give a couple of examples, but firstly, we're talking about project intake. Again, these ideas that are coming into DTI of, Department of Public Health needs to develop a new data visualization or a new dashboard. They have, a need like that. First of all, we always start play one, understand the need. What is the actual need the Chicagoan residents, businesses are asking for? We want to be responsive to a need. This isn't just technology for the sake of technology. How can we think about process? How can we think about workflow, the other services that surround something? So really just focus on need. That's the first play. It's always going to be the starting point when thinking about a digital service in delivery there. And then secondly, we think about the audiences. So in order for a technology project, or any project really, but a technology project to be successful, you need to have ownership of it. So we often find, or historically have found, perhaps the departments would come to us and say, hey, we need to be able to do A, B, and C, but then they kind of don't have the internal ownership over the service that we ultimately deliver. So, or we might find ourselves saying, hey, we want to develop this really cool tech product, but who's it for? Like, why? Who actually owns it? Who's going to run it and keep it alive and iterate on it and be an advocate for it? So we think about what is the actual need, and then we move into identifying our audiences. So again, in practice, what this looks like is project request comes into DTI, and one of the first questions that we ask after looking at that strategic alignment and identifying kind of high-level business need is, okay, who's actually responsible for this? Because more often than not, it's not going to be somebody in DTI. We might be delivering a project manager and have someone assigned to it if it's a development project, but who's the service manager? Who's actually responsible for the new service? Because a lot of times what we're developing isn't for DTI, right? These technology tools are for other departments that are delivering services, and that's the service that we offer as support there. But we want to make sure that we have this strong ownership within the departments to own the service itself. And then who's the product owner? Who's really going to be involved in the day-to-day development of the product to make sure that it's meeting that need, that the residents or the folks receiving the service they're delivering, it's actually working and they're going to be involved. So these are just two ways I kind of wanted to drill into the digital playbook and show you how we use it internally at the city. And this is also something, a resource that's available on our city website, so anyone can use it. So residents can think about it too, or folks who might also be considering how to work with the city or develop services for residents. And then one other area of planning that I will highlight briefly tonight is our contracts and procurement. So not always the shiniest part of what we do, but definitely part of what enables us to work and deliver services. So a couple of highlights, like I said, we manage dozens of IT contracts, and we at DTI not only use those contracts and partnerships with our vendors, but we also offer that out to our departments. So I actually skipped one, but we'll go to empower the departments. So not everything that DTI runs or that administers needs to be owned and run by DTI. Again, we're a small department in a large organization. So we're looking at the enterprise level. What are the services that we provide to all the city departments or numerous city departments to make sure that they can run and deliver services to residents? But often departments have very specific needs or specific programs that they might run that require technology support or technology development, but they don't necessarily need us, DTI, to be in their hands-on running it for them. They may have the expertise and the capability and the bandwidth to do it. So one of the ways that we can empower departments is to give them access to our IT contracts. Again, this kind of goes back to our governance structure of making sure that since we are the ones administering and kind of are the stewards of the contracts, we make sure that the work aligns from our enterprise standards and so on. But then we're able to kind of distribute that ownership out and say, you know what, now you can go and fly and do your project because we've kind of checked all of these boxes. We have an anchor point in DTI, but we don't need to be in your business, running your project for you. Another important thing that we do is we're able to enable some really important research with civic partners and academic institutions. So, for example, we, or I should say CIO has data sharing authority as one of the authorities under their purview. And as a result of that, we are able to grant access to data under this authority to civic partners, academic institutions who want to do research on the efficacy of the services that the city departments provide. So for example, if an academic institution, university wants to do research on the efficacy of a youth intervention program to see if that youth intervention programming actually does impact crime rates or another factor, DTI is able to enable that research through our data sharing authority. So it's a really important way that we can help with those institutions and keep that research moving forward. And then encourage investment for Chicagoans. So again, Nick kind of touched on this a bit, but looking at our contracting strategy, looking at how do we make sure that we're having strategic partners with our IT vendors. The exchange program that was highlighted is a really important example of that. We have some traditional ways in our contracting strategy that we promote investment back into locally owned Chicago businesses, but we're also really exploring some non-traditional ways. How do we encourage our vendor partners to invest back into organizations like IC Stars or others, or build apprenticeship programs, build these pipelines of employment for Chicagoans. So this is another way that we actively work with our vendors, and we're really committed to this effort. And again, standing up kind of that vendor management capability within the planning division that's new for us. So this is an area of growth that we're really focused on as well. So that is my overview of the planning division. I think one of the things that balloon. Yeah, no, that is a great transition. So thank you very much.
So we have some time for some Q&A, so I think y'all want to just all say the hand and call on folks.
Okay.
We talked about enabling the research with civic partners and academic institutions. So I'm wondering if the group here wanted to do that, would we be able to work with you on that, or is it needs to come from an organization or academic institution?
Yeah.
Go on.
Oh, sure. I would say the way that we currently have been working has primarily been through academic institutions, and some of these divisions within that have established contracts. So we do have contracts with these institutions that kind of allow different projects to proceed through this kind of like umbrella type project. But that being said, all of this again is kind of a new area that we're learning and really want to be, creative and open-minded about. So I'd be curious to hear, Nick, if you had any thoughts on other ways we could be creative.
Yeah, I think that because of those contracts are they take a long time to create. I think that's why major academic institutions have succeeded in getting those. And so one thing I would say is that the way these work is that if an institution wants to study something, they can start the process of requesting. If the city department wants to request an institution to study something, that starts the process. So if you're all connected to any of those in any way or can create connections, you want to study an area, a professor at one of these institutions or a city department itself can be the catalyst that starts that research. Just, we'll just continue to go down the road here.
According to the folks at the Internet Equity Initiative at the University of Chicago, 1/5 of our citizens in Chicago don't have any internet access at all. Another much greater number have underserved or can't afford unlimited data plans on their phones. So how does a People First digital playbook speak to those folks?
Oh, that's a good question. So the city has a digital equity council, which I think you may be familiar with, that's working to bridge the gap in digital divide through use of things like city department funds through RFPs, helping being part of building out more fiber within the network that the city control, and then funding organizations that provide more ability to invest in ways that provide better connections to the internet. That's a body of work that is the city has a role, and the federal government ought to have a role, the state ought to have a role in investing in ways to make sure that everyone is. That's access to the actual connectivity. DTI's role comes in what can you do with your government after you have access to that connectivity. If our services aren't simple, easy to use, and reducing friction that's involved with using the internet in any way, then after we achieve getting people that connectivity, they still have a burden of connecting up, getting that help. So there's two things that have to come together, and the digital playbook helps us make sure that those who can get connected can get those services. And then we've got to consider investments like Chicago Connected and in our RFPs to get more internet service.
I was interested in the innovation part of what you do, and I was just wondering, do you have like open forums where you ask for people to do like a pitch meeting? If so, what's that about? If not, why not?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to go to a picture here. Back to the slide. So here in the office of CIO, I didn't mention this when we talked, but I have in the slide here community of practice. And that's a picture of one of our actual meetings. We have taken a community of practice approach to not only innovation, but to city improvement overall. And it's sprang out of something that I was working on before we had a department that I was working really hard on. Okay, we don't have a Department of Technology and Innovation. What are the ways that we're going to ensure that everyone's connected who's working on how to make better digital services? But then after the department got created, this concept has taken off. We have meetings with people from lots of different city departments who only met each other through this community of practice or different ones that we have. We get together weekly just to share, to say, hey, this is what I learned in trying out this new tool, or this is almost like a mini hackathon within city government. And I don't go. I used to go. And I don't go because I think real innovation happens. Just speak freely and make mistakes and try things out. And I think that's the bottom of it, right? And so that's something we make sure that we cultivate these spaces, these groups for communities of practice to grow around, whether it's one around like low-code tools or one around data or one around process improvement for innovation. That's how we are.
And that allows for that creative kind of environment. Can I ask more about how much influence with Google establishing themselves here in Chicago was pushing this department as well? And then what do you take from enterprises, organizations like Google or some of their companies that have been doing this kind of thing? Is there anything that practices that you take from them and duplicate, or like agile processes and that kind of stuff?
So I think a lot about Google and what they're doing in the Thompson Center, and having worked at that location my entire career since a long time ago, I'm grateful for the investment in that part of the city and that building. Mayor Johnson created the Department of Technology and Innovation. I didn't speak with Google. Google had nothing to do with that. And their inspiration from approach. I think that Google has really excelled in user experience and how they take things like Google Search. You can go all the way back to Google Search and a lot of the products that they've created. I think I've heard them say themselves, they don't invent it. They just take what's been invented and make it easier to use. That's something that has happened in the past, and that's I think it's worth being inspired on. I'm not a Google expert, and I think that there's a lot of questions that arise with large technology companies today that I'm not really well suited to sit here and debate from PTI's point of view. But I think that there's at least some steps that take.
I just want to say 311 app. It was updated since the last time I did it, and it really was a good experience.
Awesome. Okay, way in the back. It's all.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very interested in uni level decision-making, participatory budgeting, things like that. I've been very interested in developing Barcelona of this platform, see that continues to use for these types of projects, and wondering whether you've looked into this type of functionality or might have any projects of your own nature going.
I'll say that. So thanks for the question. I'm very interested in concepts of participatory co-governance. I hear the mayor talk a lot about, asks us as departments is what are we doing to improve the voice of people in decision making, and what are you doing to get to true co-governance, which is when you don't actually presuppose decisions and you have people's outside your institution involved in making actual decisions. And so I want you all to hear a little bit about what Melissa's been doing to take the first steps from a department point of view to let go of some of our internal control around how we budget. Because as a city department, we create our budgets and present them, and we say, hey, this is what we want to ask for every year. And we opened up to other city departments kind of process of IT budgeting for the first time ever. Let us talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the IT budgeting process that Nick is referencing is a new process that we developed in partnership with our Office of Budget and Management, so the budget department, and we put it together in preparation for our 2026. So right now, we run on a calendar year for our fiscal year. So right now, the city is in 2026 budget preparation. We'll have a budget passed for 2026 by the end of 2025, so that on January 1st. Historically, and still to a certain extent, departments develop their budget requests that are submitted then through the budget department to the mayor for consideration, and they do this individually, kind of like in their own cycle, which makes sense to a certain degree because departments are familiar with their programmatic needs. Their programmatic needs are often unique to each city department. But when we start thinking about investment into shared services, streamlining services from a standards perspective, and then also reducing costs, so looking at purchasing, looking for redundancy, looking at things like that. Obviously, we recognize that IT is the place where a lot of money is spent. And if we have all of the individual departments making IT funding decisions or attempting to make those decisions in silo, it really prevents central IT, DTI, from being able to help maximize that delivery, make sure that that money is being put to best use, and identifying overlap in needs. So what I'm getting at is that for the 2026 budget preparation, what we did in partnership with OBM, the technology strategy group, that co-governance body within the city, is we developed a process where all city departments submitted their IT funding requests for 2026 and beyond, some projection beyond. And it allowed our IT strategic decision-making groups, so that governance structure I was talking about, to have a look at these requests and identify areas for consolidation, identify areas for recommendation on bringing systems together. So if we see across multiple departments, for example, the need for additional resident services, and when we recognize as the IT group to be able to say, oh, those would be services we could add into 311, make them available for residences, for residents. But from a department perspective, they might not necessarily know that that's something that can happen. So all of that to say, moving forward into 2026 and beyond, we've really opened up this visibility into how the city and how departments would like to and plan to spend money. So right now, that voice is opened up in a way within the city structure that we've never really seen before. We will continue to iterate on this. We're already planning for what this looks like next year as we prepare for 2027 and beyond, to continue improving on some of these processes, making sure that there really is a collective voice representing all the city departments and the services that they deliver out, to make sure that we're being as efficient as we can with the limited funding that's available. And then one other point to your question about principles of co-governance is thinking about, so again, that governance structure that we touched on earlier still continues to evolve and develop and become more mature. We are moving out of that. We're trying to become more service focused. And one of the ways that we're thinking about the next levels of maturity for that governance structure is, how do we bring in the voice of the resident? How do we bring in the voice of our community organizations in a meaningful way to IT decision making that we haven't really done before? So we don't have that pipeline fully established yet. We're starting to work with groups like the Chicago Equity Council, because they have a strong co-governance model working within that group. So that is very much on the roadmap and in development, and something that is one of our goals to continue maturing the structure.
I'd just like to point out, my question has nothing to do with any of that, but how residents deal with money being spent in their communities.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do know that OBM this year and prior years host the participatory budget events. So a series of roundtable events, which perhaps you participated in. DTI also participates in those events, so we come in a listening mode to hear what do residents want money spent on? And it's not necessarily going to be an explicit request for an IT service, right? So our job is to go to these listening sessions, hear what residents need, and then work with OBM and the mayor's office to translate what do some of those needs mean from a technology perspective. How can we support those programmatic services that the departments might be a little more hands-on with, but how do we, from a technology perspective, identify where technology can be a solution? So again, going back to that point of identifying an actual need. So if a resident comes to these participatory budget roundtable events and they have a very specific need, specific to their community and where they live, and they know the challenges. They know their community better than anyone, and so we're there to listen. We bring that in, and we actively participate in these sessions to hear how we can help, translate some of those needs to OBM from an IT perspective.
So we got time for about one more question.
So back to that 6 million number that you mentioned, cost savings. What is that? What was that comprised of? Like, was it mostly like efficiencies with like tech debt, or like how is that right?
Yeah, it's a combination of things like looking at contracts that we have where we pay for services, professional services, and analyzing how much we utilizing it. Can we cut down the number of hours? So a lot of it we just found things have changed. We can reduce the amount of we spend on this. In some areas, it's software licenses. So much of what we do in technology, we just pay as you go. Right? We're all just as consumers. We're all doing it right now. All subscriptions. It's no different with government. So looking at how many we're buying for the whole city and figuring out ways to reduce it, cut it down. And then finding not necessarily duplication, I guess, but things where we can take a look at what our employees are doing, what our registrars are doing, and saying, can you just do all that over here, and then you don't over here, and the vendor maybe doesn't need to take that on. These things take a lot of effort, but at the end of the day, they become no-brainers, and everybody's like, sure, let's do it, and then we reduce the cost, and that's what we want. We're just getting started.
All right. Let's give a round of applause.